orders. The bishop orders his tomb at St. Praxed's. It is on page 332. Again, it's Browning's The Bishop Orders His Tomb. And what we were saying at the end of last class is that whereas the early dramatic monologues of Browning have characters who have no redemptive qualities, like the Duke, just a complete scalawag, starting pretty much with this poem, The Bishop Orders, he starts to have something that I would call a redemptive possibility. Almost none of them actually take that opportunity. But there's something in them that has a possible seed of redemption, which again, they reject it, but he humanizes them more. Right? And again, Browning did become more and more of a Christian writer. Partly was the influence of his wife, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, who was a very strong Christian. Actually, the two most famous female poets in the 19th century are Christina Rossetti and Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and they were both very strong Christians, and that may be why they don't even talk about them. You would think all the feminist critics would say, let's read them, but they don't like to read them because they're Christian. And the only thing they read by Rossetti, she wrote something called The Goblin Market, which allows itself for a sort of sexual Freudian reading. So they do that and ignore everything else she wrote. You do, you really have to. But I mean, it's like literally, they just ignore everything else. I mean, it's unbelievable. But anyway, she did have a good effect on him. Yeah, it's just so beautiful. In the bleak midwinter. And then, does anybody know who wrote the tune? Preston, who wrote the tune of In the Bleak Midwinter? It's the same guy who wrote the planets. Yeah, it's Gustav Holst. That's why it's such a beautiful. It's got a tune by Holst and lyric by Rossetti, who's famous. She was the sister of Dante Gabriele Rossetti, who was a famous painter and critic too. Oh, which one? What is it?
The caterpillar.
Oh, really?
It's like short little.
Okay, I'm getting that. Man, I love that. That's cool stuff. Cool stuff. Anyway, so we already figured out the setting, because I said to be a good reader of a dramatic monologue, you have to be a sort of psychotherapist to figure out how they tick, but you also have to be a detective to figure out by clues what's going on. And we said at the end of last class, the bishop is on his deathbed, and now the facade is coming down, and the kids he's talking to are not really his nephews. He's had to say that. They're actually his illegitimate sons. And you can see there's no real love between them. And we find out that he once loved a woman, the mother of this. She's unnamed, but he seems to have really loved her. But this rival bishop, Gandalf, who's already dead, seems to have stolen her away from him, right? And after he lost her, we saw that he just sort of receded into St. Praxed's and allowed it to become almost literally his universe, so that when he looks up at the cupola, at the dome, and sees the frescoes of angels painted, he almost seems to imagine they are actual angels, right? That they're real, and that he imagines that even after he dies, he will still be, in a sense, living in St. Praxed's. He's got such a physical view of things. In fact, one of his problems is he doesn't seem to be able to distinguish between the physical and the spiritual. And yet, that's actually one of his glories, because his understanding of art is so powerful, it's almost spiritual. He's sort of twisted, right? I mean, well, one of the things we said about John Donne that's so powerful, and we're going to be looking at John Donne poems on Wednesday, is that Donne wrote his seduction poems as if they were religious poems, and he wrote his religious poems almost as if they were seduction poems. Okay, that he brought together body and soul in this incredibly powerful way. In a way, the bishop has the potential to do that, but he gets it all wrong. He gets twisted. But the potential's there, his way of looking at things. So, actually, jump to page 333 now. Yeah, page 333 now. And as he's talking, he starts to talk about exactly the kind of stone he wants for all the parts of his tomb. And you understand that, I mean, marble is alive. Right? Marble actually has veins. They call it veins. I mean, it's like a living stone. It's powerful. And he has this incredibly physical love of art that ultimately is more sensuous than sensual, the phrase we used when we talked about John Keats. But look at the way he describes this marble. It's line 29. He says, "Peach blossom marble all, the rare, the ripe, as fresh poured red wine of a mighty pulse." Now, your note helps you to talk about pulse as another word for pulp, like the pulp of the grape. But I think there's a pun here. As red wine of a mighty pulse. It's almost like he's cut his wrist, and every time his heart pumps, blood red is spurting out. Right? Not so much to be gory here, but like stone is a living flesh and blood thing to him. He's got part of the glory of the Renaissance. But it's all jumbled together, as we'll see as we go along. All right. Then he sends his sons to look for some precious stone that he's buried and hidden away because he wants to keep it for his funeral, right? You know, he's a bishop. He's not supposed to be keeping these things. So he tells them where to look for it. Line 40. He says, go there, go to the oil press, drop water gently till the surface sink, and if ye find, God, I know not, I bedded in store of rotten fig leaves, soft, and corded up in a tight olive frail, some lump, God, of lapis lazuli, which is a beautiful blue stone. That's actually where they got the blue color from in paint. That's why blue paint was like the most expensive paint. And it was only, you know what blue was always used for? What character in religious art always had a blue color? The Virgin Mary. And that's because blue, in some ways, even more expensive than the purple, because it called for lapis lazuli, which is an expensive stone. Right? So he says, then he wants to describe the lump of lapis, and he says, big as a Jew's head cut off at the nape, blue as a vein or the Madonna's breast. Are those the metaphors or similes you would have used to describe the color of stone? They're sort of violent and sexual. And again, in one sense, it's amazing. This guy has such a response to art, but it's also kind of twisted. Who is the Jew's head that got cut off at the nape? Yeah, John the Baptist, right? And it's interesting because one gets the feeling that this woman he loved was maybe almost like a Salome character or something like that, right? But blue as a vein or the Madonna's breast, that's not exactly sexual, but it's kind of a weird way to speak about a statue of the Madonna, of the Virgin Mary, right? Not the pop star. Anyway, again, very, very strange imagery to describe what is ultimately dead cold stone. He says, sons, all have I bequeathed you, villas all, that brave Frascati villa with its bath, so let the blue lump poise between my knees, like God the Father's globe on both his hands ye worship in the Jesuit church, so gay. For Gandalf shall not choose, but see and burst. Okay. So many things coming together. Basically, what is he trying to do to his sons? Exactly, bribe them. If you get me what I want, I'll leave my villas to you and all this expenses. So he's bribing them. There's no love between the two of them. And it's kind of weird. He wants to put that lump between his knees. I mean, there's, again, something weirdly sexual there. And he's thinking of images of God the Father, where God, like some art, you'll see God like sitting on a globe, which is actually the earth, and all these images. But they all get sort of mixed together in him. And all he can think of is, oh, when my tomb is beautiful, who will burst with envy? Gandalf, his rival. Again, not the magician, but his rival bishop. It's so weird to read this now. What? Wait,
This is why he was gone?
Yeah, this is why he's gone. Yeah, it's so weird, right? I don't even know where he got that name. And then he says, swift as a weaver's shuttle fleet our years. Man goeth to the grave, and where is he? Did I say basalt for my slab sons? Black. 'Twas ever antique black, I meant. Okay. This poem almost offers an early version of what's called stream of consciousness technique. Can anybody tell me what that is? Have you ever heard that?
Yes, I heard of it books, like
Good, like postmodern books.
They would just write, and it was literally stream of consciousness. Every thought would just be kind of this. There was no like framework.
Good.
Like a narrator, actions. It's just
Good. There's something short. Can anybody think of authors who have used stream of consciousness? Famous authors who have used it? To the Lighthouse. That's by Virginia Woolf. Sound and the Fury. You know who wrote that? That's William Faulkner. He uses it. Ulysses by James Joyce. He also uses that stream of where you're following the way a mind works. And usually the mind doesn't worry about things like logically connecting together. I mean, sometimes it can be, but you can have an unreliable that doesn't use stream of consciousness, but it's just like you want to capture the movement of the human brain, which doesn't necessarily think in grammatically correct sentences. and you move.
Follow a logical pattern.
Good.
Just jump.
Good, you move back and forth. And like I said, it happens in poetry, but it also does happen in novels. And in fact, it sort of started by happening in novels, like Virginia Woolf and things like that. Here, this is almost an early version, because when you're on your deathbed, you're going to be, making, there's two things when people, go off on tangents that are completely unreal. There's no connection between it. Either means you're dying or you're Dr. Bolston, right? Sorry, maybe he's listening to that. I haven't told a Bolston joke in a while. But well, less than a while. I like that. Anyway.
I remember when I had a class in Georgia right after a class of his, and I would hear you both tell different versions of the same joke.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
It would be hilarious.
Oh my gosh. Different versions. So yeah, maybe we're both unreliable narrators, that kind of thing. But here, okay. What I just read, starting with swift as a weaver's shuttle, he begins by doing what you would expect a clergyman to do on his deathbed. And what is that? That's it? Okay, pray. And then when he says it, swift as a weaver's shuttle, fleet our years, man goeth to the grave. And where is he? If you look at your note, if you have a note of him, he's quoting the book of Job. I mean, it's something you should be meditating on your life, meditating on the scriptures, on the brevity of life. This is what and this is how he started the whole thing. Remember, the first line was, vanity saith the preacher vanity, quoting Ecclesiastes. Right? Ecclesiastes and the book of Job are kind of good things to quote when you're on your deathbed, thinking about the brevity of life. But then he goes from that to what? Did I say basalt for my son's absence? Black. It's just from the spiritual to the completely physical and practical. And they're all jumbled together. It's like he can't even make a distinction anymore between something high and serious and linked to God to something that is so worldly and so nitpicky. Right? Just to give you an example of this, Monty Python. Monty Python, and a lot of the humor of satire is when you yoke together something very serious and something frivolous and treat it one way or another. And I remember in The Meaning of Life, which is barely a movie, but in The Meaning of Life, there's this headmaster and he's speaking to the boys and he's reading and he's going over this unbelievable tedious change he's made to the schedule. And he's going on, reading it. And while he's doing it, somebody hands him a message. And he goes, and then we'll do this and do this. Oh, James, it appears your mother has died. And then he goes right back to the tedious thing he's saying. Right? It's this thing that doesn't quite go together, and that's where some of the humor comes. But here, it's capturing his mind, his inability to make any distinction between the spiritual and the physical, the sacred and the profane, all mixed together. But not in a good way, like John Donne. But good. It's not incarnational. Good. It's more just a jumble. It's a jumble. He's always ready to come out. But here's another example where we see both his strength and his weakness. He says, how else shall ye contrast my frieze to come beneath the bas-relief in bronze ye promised me, those pans and nymphs ye wot of, and perchance some tripod, Thyrsis with a vase or so, the Saviour and his Sermon on the Mount, St. Praxit in a glory, and one pan ready to twitch the nymph's last garment off, and Moses with the tables. Okay, he's describing what his frieze is going to look, and what has he done in that image?
He's mixed together like Jesus giving a sermon.
Good.
Good.
All mixed together, jumbled together. He makes no distinction. Now, here's the weird thing. That, rightly understood, is the glory of the Renaissance, of being both Christian and humanist, being able to have high art that has, like Dante's Divine Comedy, that uses pagan imagery but here, it's just a jumble. It's not incarnational. It's a jumble, all mixed together. You go, good? It becomes meaningless. It's a good point. He can't, he wants to bring...
Dante takes the best of what the pagans did and
Good.
uses it to enhance and heighten and make relatable what is not always understandable
Good.
in Christianity. To not humanize it, but like just to make a bridge through something.
Good. That's a good word. It's a bridge. Good.
That's very, very divine.
So the best of the virtuous pagans can lead you up towards the truth of Christ.
That's why Virgil can take you
Good.
not far enough. And then you get the next step where it's Beatrice and St. Bernard and they take you the rest of
Then you need Beatrice Jones. Is she a Jones girl? I don't know. It's definitely not. Bad picture. Good. What is this?
This is just like, well, that was a cool piece
Okay.
of rock, and maybe this is a cool piece of rock, and now I stack them on top of
Good.
each other as a new rock.
Helter skelter, right? Oh, nothing there, right? I mean, it's like for a moment he wants to do what HBU wants to do, bring Athens and Jerusalem together, but it's all a jumble.
But he doesn't really understand Athens or Jerusalem, so he can't.
And maybe that's it. See? So then, like I said, there's just a seed. There's the possibility that he could come up with an incarnational understanding, but it's all a jumble.
Right idea.
Oh, yeah.
Wrong way to go.
Wrong way around. There's the wrong execution or whatever, right? But again, he's a human character, and you want to see him, but he doesn't come out of it. He says, "Oh, but I know ye mark me not. What do they whisper thee, child of my bowels, handsome? Ye hope to revel down my villa while I gasp, bricked o'er with beggars, mouldy travertine, which Gandalf from his tomb chuckles at. You want to put me in some terrible stone, and Gandalf will be laughing like they're continuing their rivalry after they're dead, because that's his amazing image." He says, "Nay, boys, ye love me, all of jasper then. 'Tis jasper ye stand pledged to. Lest I grieve, my bath must needs be left behind. Alas, one block, pure green as a pistachio nut. There's plenty jasper somewhere in the world." And he does. And there's a romance and there's a desire for beauty. And have I not St. Praxed's ear to pray horses for ye, and brown Greek manuscripts, and mistresses with great, smooth, marbly limbs? Come on, give me what I want, and I'll pray to the saint, so she'll give you all the physical things you want. But even here, like he can't think of anything except in terms of art. So these women are fleshly, but they're also sensuous rather than sensual. You might imagine these women painted by what famous Baroque artist? You know what Baroque artist paints women very fleshy? It would be Rubens. You know who Rubens is? What's that? Remember Rubens? Yeah, beautiful Rubens. Has that. So again, all mixed together. That's if he carved my epitaph aright. Choice Latin, big phrase. Tully. Tully is another Cicero. Tully's every word, no gaudy wear like Gandalf's second line. Tully, my masters, opium serves his need. So this guy has a love for fine art, but he also has a love for fine Latin. He's got all the things that make the Renaissance great, but it hasn't come together. It's like some student papers I read, right? Great ideas, but they just haven't come together. Okay, I'm grading papers right now. In there, a jumble.
He desires beauty and he wants to seek after it, but he doesn't understand.
Okay, good. Maybe he finally doesn't understand. And of course, if he doesn't understand beauty, he doesn't understand goodness or truth, right? He doesn't understand. Maybe if he had some lectures with Dr. Eliot, it would straighten him out. Possible.
I haven't had no lectures about that.
You still haven't? Oh,
No.
what do I?
She's remote systems.
Oh, okay. She's the one that always talks about
The
art.
lecture's always remote. That shit's not out there.
Yeah, I know. Maybe she just, you know what, she might not be able to figure out, because she always uses a PowerPoint because she's showing art, so she needs a PowerPoint. And she was probably just not figuring out how to do it. Yeah, I don't even do that. I haven't figured it out. Okay, now watch this. Then he says, once I've got everything exactly the way I want it, this is how he imagines eternity after he dies. And then, line 80, and then how I shall lie through centuries and hear the blessed mutter of the Mass, and see God made and eaten all day long, and feel the steady candle flame, and taste good, strong, thick, stupefying incense smoke. This is beautiful and yet eerie. It's as if he imagines what?
That he's still awake and
Yeah, like he's actually alive inside of his tomb and still participating. In one sense, that's cool, but it's also kind of really scary and eerie. Right? And notice how he imagines all five of what seem to be alive. See how it's written? You see how he references basically all five senses? Like I'm still there hearing and smelling and tasting and touching and you know, it's like everything is still there. He's alive in his tomb. He doesn't...
He'd be happy
Yeah.
to be dead and rest.
Yeah, I know. It's odd. I mean, he doesn't really understand the resurrection of the body or the immortality of the soul. It's just body. He can't understand. He should. He should have this wonderful incarnational and idea. But I mean, and of course, it seems like maybe all these years he's imagined that he was literally doing what when he was taking the Eucharist, the Lord's Supper. Yeah, like literally eating, right? You know? Yeah, take it to the extreme, right? I mean, it's very odd.
Clearly not. He thinks nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
He has to rely on the box.
He will just continue. I mean, it's eerie. That's why he wants everything perfect, right? Weird, right? For as I lie here, hours of the dead night, dying in state, and by such slow degrees, I fold my arms as if they clasped a crook, and stretch my feet forth straight as stone could point, and let the bedclothes for a mortcloth drop into great laps and fall. You know, he just imagines his body laid out, everything. It's just still physical, still. Yeah, he cannot think beyond the physical. He doesn't understand the spiritual, and yet he sees the spiritual in art, but he can't approach it.
And what I find so interesting is instead of comparing stone to living things and having stone be an imitation of living things, he compares the living things himself to stone imitations.
Interesting. So,
like a flip perspective. I'm thinking about representation because we're reading Aristotle.
Oh, okay, yeah. It is twisted around, yeah.
And stretch my feet forth straight as stone, and let the bedclothes be like stone bedclothes.
It's weird. I mean, you've all seen the old tombs like of medieval knights where you see them laying out in state with their hands, and there's often a dog at their feet and stuff. It's that kind of art he's thinking about. And again, like you said, he would be a great connoisseur of art, wouldn't he? But that's like what... And you've probably met people for whom art has become a substitute for religion. That can almost happen to music majors, can't it, Preston? Okay, if you're not careful, right? That beauty, whether it's music or art or writing novels, poetry, it can become a substitute for that. And you stop there. You never move past it on there. Yeah. Yeah, and so, like I said, this is an amazing portrait of a human being getting deep into his mind. He says, okay, and as yon tapers dwindle, and again, in other words, the candles are moving away, and strange thoughts grow with a certain humming in my ears about the life before I lived this life, and this life too, popes, cardinals, and priests. St. Praxed at his Sermon on the Mount. What's happening? What's happening to his mind? It's confusing, coming unglued. That's stream of consciousness. And there's a double problem here. Not only was it Jesus that gave the sermon, but St. Praxed was actually a woman. It was a female saint. So he's got everything jumbled about. St. Praxed at his Sermon on the Mount, your tall, pale mother with her talking eyes. He's remembered her again. And new-found agate urns as fresh as day. And Marble's language, Latin, pure, discreet. Aha! Elucessibat, quoth our friend. He used old, lesser Latin rather than the pure Latin of Cicero, Tully. No Tully, said I, opiate at the best. Evil and brief has been my pilgrimage. He starts to do the Bible again, and then all Lapis, all sons, else I give the Pope my villas. Will you ever eat my heart? Ever your eyes were as a lizard's quick, they glitter like your mother's for my soul. Does he feel that woman devoured him, devoured his possibility? We don't know anything about her, but what was she, a Salome character? It's just interesting that he mentions John the Baptist. Or ye would heighten my impoverished frieze, pierce out its starved design, and fill my vase with grapes, and add a visor and a turn, and to the tripod you would tie a lynx that in his struggle throws the thyrsus down, to comfort me in my entablature, whereon I am to die, till I must ask, do I live, am I dead? There, leave me there, for ye have stabbed me with ingratitude to death. You wish it God, you wish it stone, gritstone, and crumble, clammy squares which sweat as if the corpse they keep were oozing through, and no more lapis to delight the world. Here, he imagines himself, if he has bad stone, he's going to be sweating through the stone, as if the stone is sweating with corruption.
It sounds like he thinks that not making the tomb is going to kill him a second.
Yeah, in a weird way, right. It will crush him.
And it's really sad. It was like desperately clinging
Yeah.
to what's kind of been his God.
Right.
Beauty.
Good, that's what it is.
But that's all he can.
It's slipping away from him. He wants to control this situation, but it's slipping away from him. Then he ends, well, go, I bless ye. Fewer tapers there, but no, he's still the master of ceremonies, doing exactly right. But in a row, and going, turn your backs, I, like departing altar ministrants, and leave me in my church, the church for peace, that I may watch at leisure if he leers old Gandalf at me from his onion stone, as still he envied me. So fair she was. That wonderful ending. After all of this, his last thought is not about stone. It's not about his tomb. It's not about his rivalry with Gandalf. What is it?
About the woman he loved.
So maybe he really did love her. Maybe that was the one human thing in his life. And who knows what happened? She left him. She left her. Maybe Gandalf had better stone. I don't know what the story, but the redemptive moment. The last thing he thinks, it's not enough to quote save him, but it kind of humanizes him. His last thought is of her, not of the stone. The one thing that maybe was real and human in his life.
I was just thinking in Coleridge's Dejection and Ode,
Okay.
he said he kind of ends with his love for the lady, and that's kind of
Oh,
what
that's
brings him
interesting.
out of his despair, is his love for
Good.
the other person.
And he wishes her well, wishes she will never have to suffer that. So maybe just a slight touch of generosity at the end that potentially would have had. Who knows? Maybe, it'd be kind of sad to say that the only touch of real spiritual truth in his life was his one illegitimate relationship. But again, she seemed to be the only link between him and like a human life, warmth, and when she was gone, all he had left was his stone and his beauty. And it's wonderful that his greatest understanding of beauty is stone that's dead. It's not even something like a painting that seems a little more, alive or whatever, music or something.
Marble can be more lifelike than painting.
I mean, again, because it's 3D, I guess, yeah. It's amazing. That's still how Michelangelo did it, and how Bernini did it, how they got like flesh out of that. It's unbelievable stuff. So that's our bishop, very sad. Okay, now, let us turn to Matthew Arnold, one final Victorian poet, and the poem is called Dover Beach. It's on page 433. Matthew Arnold, Dover Beach, 433. Matthew Arnold's a fascinating figure because, okay, remember how I showed when we read In Memoriam, how in the beginning of In Memoriam, Tennyson is writing as a romantic, but he slowly matures and swells into a Victorian. Right? In his poetry, Tennyson was able to make that shift from romantic to Victorian. Even actually, Robert Browning, if you read his really early poems, he does have some really early lyrics that are very excessively romantic. In fact, he started as a disciple of Shelley. Just as Tennyson loved Keats, he loved Shelley. Matthew Arnold was a big fan of Wordsworth when he started. And Robert Browning, rather than saying he shifted from a romantic to a Victorian, he just invented his own genre and did his dramatic monologues. That was his way of moving past excessive introspection, whatever. But Matthew Arnold, in his poetry, was never able to break from his romantic side. As one critic once said it, Matthew Arnold was a romantic poet who didn't want to be one. But he couldn't shake out of it in his poetry. And so Matthew Arnold is as famous as a poet as he is as a prose writer. Now, when I say prose, he wasn't a novelist. He wrote essays. He was what's called a man of letters. He wrote the kind of essays that Lewis or Chesterton or something would write. Dorothy Sayers. Good, very good. Yeah, I'm saying good, like that. He wrote about issues of the day. He was again, we call it a man of letters, a public intellectual, another word for this was a Victorian sage, they called him. There were a lot of these Victorian writers who wrote prose essays, non-fiction prose, another way to put it. But it was meant to be read and discussed by people. Other people that wrote that are Cardinal Newman, if you've ever heard of him. John Ruskin was a very famous art critic who wrote things like this. Now, on the less Christian side was T.H. Huxley, who was Darwin's bulldog. He wrote essays to promote evolution and all the ideas. He wrote about education. He wrote about authority, all those sorts of things. John Stuart Mill also did. He was also a philosopher, but sometimes he also wrote other pieces that were more talking, man of letters kinds of things. And so only once Arnold switched to that and became, in some way, he is the original critic. He almost invented literary criticism in some ways. He wrote criticism and he wrote commentary, and in that he was able to move into the Victorian world. But his poetry, and people go back and forth, I think some of his poetry is great, not all of it, some of it's good, but his poetry is very, very helpful because it gives us a sense of what it means to live in an age of transition. What do I mean by that? Arnold is writing in a moment when Romanticism is dying, but Victorianism has not quite taken over, and he's stranded in an age of transition. Can't really go back, but doesn't feel able to go forward, right? What's that? in limbo. That's going on. So he was born too late to be a happy, contented romantic, but he was born just a little too early to really be a full-blooded Victorian. And he always felt caught. Like I said, he became a Victorian, but only by turning away from poetry. Another phrase a critic uses, in all of Arnold's poetry is a sense of belatedness. You know what a belated birthday card is? Those are always the funniest ones. It's late, right? It's belated, right? Do the Jones girls send belated, or they're always on time? The belated cards are often funny. Depends on who they are. No, they deserve a birthday card.
Have I seen you in the last 10 years? Then you'll probably get it. If not, then you're probably not getting a card. Or if you do, it's going to be 6 months later.
I love it. So he was just born too late. He wants to be a romantic, but he now knows too much. He can't go back. And so he's, like I said, he couldn't make the bridge in his poetry like Tennyson did. But his poetry is helpful, not only because they're good poems, but they're almost a document of a period where you're stranded like that. Right? So let's look at Dover Beach. This is a shorter one. In a sense, this is his version of Dejection and Ode, or stanzas written in dejection. It's a kind of a crisis poem, except it doesn't really have a resolution, because he can't have a resolution because he's no longer really a romantic. So his angst is there, but he's unable to solve it. Right? So he begins. He is Dover Beach. He's by the sea. You know where Dover is? The White Cliffs of Dover. Okay, there at the very southern tip of England, overlooking what body of water? Good, the English Channel, and then the other side is France, right? The warm, whatever, France. And so he's there, although he writes it as if he were all the way up on the North Coast, because it's so cold. But imagine he's there at Dover Beach, and he's gone there, whatever, for a weekend, and he's brought this lady with him who is clearly cold as ice. Okay? Maybe not necessarily bad, not even necessarily cheating on him or anything. She just is cold. Right? She doesn't have... Yeah, maybe, okay? She just doesn't have that love of things, right? And like I said, generally speaking, we imagine the wife dragging her husband to some kind of artistic thing, right? But there are some girls that you meet that just have no appreciation for beauty or art or anything, okay? And then it's like, why can't we just match the people up? Like, we can't match the artistic guy up with the artistic girl. We always end up, maybe opposites attract or something like that. Maybe that's it, you would, that's right. That's right, you know?
But it's also a balance, because
Yeah.
artistic one in the relationship will bring some of the art and beauty to the other one, but they'll balance them out and keep them from, living in the cause.
So see, so who's more artistic, your mother or your father?
Mom.
Mommy, she's the one artistic.
Yeah.
Okay.
We would go to museums, which was never very fun because there's 6 kids and
Oh, gosh.
someone's always like, I'm hungry.
Ah.
I gotta go to the
Or they're
bathroom.
like, let's just touch it.
That was this year, but yes, my mom's commented that it's not only go to museums with dad as a family, so they're like, all right, gotta keep moving. Gotta
Oh,
keep moving,
okay,
gotta keep
right.
moving, and-
Well, that was kind of lame, I guess.
That's true, yeah. My father's like that. Keep going.
For like 6 weeks, they were going back to flash keys in the kitchen. And dad would like just take it all.
She spent very much time in the kitchen. That's kind of her promise.
She was also the one who always did art class.
Oh, she did. Okay,
And then
see?
she was the teacher. So
Yeah.
She was also the one who enjoyed it the most.
There we go, see? Wow, this is funny. So imagine him there, and he begins sort of like stanzas written in dejection, and actually dejection and ode both begin with a description of like a beautiful setting. Right? Everything looks beautiful, the night's calm, all of that sort of stuff, but we're going to find out quickly that would love to participate in this quietness, but seems unable to. So he says, the sea is calm tonight. Ultimately, he means the English Channel. The sea is calm tonight. The tide is full. The moon lies fair upon the straits. On the French coast, the light gleams and is gone. The cliffs of England stand glimmering and vast out in the tranquil bay. So it's such a hopeful beginning. It's even a touch of patriotism there. England, everything's wonderful. And he says to the girl, come to the window. Sweet is the night air. Only from the long line of spray where the sea meets the moon-blanched land, Listen. You hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling at their return up the high strand. Begin and cease and then again begin with tremulous cadence slow and bring the eternal note of sadness in. Ooh, we're moving quickly towards that existential despair, that cold. Now, okay, sometimes you go to a beach, like in Florida, and long sand beaches. But some beaches, like in California, are very rocky. Have you ever seen that? Rocks and pebbles, and as it gets rolled back and forth, there's like a sound, a grating sound. And I suppose it could be restful, or it could be more like the way the poet here, the speaker, I think we can call him Arnold, but the speaker here, it's a sound that suggests not beauty, but almost a kind of despair, like a grinding down at the grindstone, right?
So where's on your nose?
Very good. Where's on your nose, right? Back and forth, but it's not, because normally the sound of the tide going in and out can be very romantic and peaceful is a good word, peaceful. But here, again, it's just, it's. I think the way your generation feels, right? Always a low level of anxiety, always grating away at you. Right? That's what it is. Never goes away. You guys are all going to be old before your time, I'm afraid. Don't do that.
Well, we've been reading books that are 200 years before us, so that might just be a gift.
Yeah, it's worse when you're like a smart kid and they keep telling you, oh, you're so mature for your age. Like, well, eventually, like, you reach a point where you're like, oh, I'm just dead.
I'm just dead. That's right. I just did.
You're old before your time, then eventually you also will die before your time. You're still walking around like, I shouldn't even be here.
I just want to be a kid. That's great. I'm just dead. You have an old soul.
Eventually your soul is gone.
That's right. Age quickly. Oh my, it's funny. The eternal note of sadness in. But it's not a note of sadness that really brings hope with it. It's not the Felix culpa, right? It's just grinding away. He feels cut off. It's an old song, Lost in the Stars. He feels lost, detached. Again, that existential despair of, I hear the sound, but it doesn't bring much hope. It's not even like...
Anxiety is a good word.
It really is. I mean, it's just like Tennyson might hear the sound of progress or something, going on in and out, the ship's going on, but he just feels trapped. And then he makes a move here that's actually very similar to the Ode to a Nightingale by Keats. He listens to the nightingale and describes its song. And then remember, I think it's the second to last stanza, he suddenly imagines that this same song of the nightingale was what? Remember, he kind of moves away. It was heard by emperor and clown, perhaps by Ruth as she made her way through the alien corn. In other words, he starts listening to the sound and then he imagines it as a sound that was heard 1,000 years ago or 2,000 or 500 years ago. We suddenly move away, and that song of the bird becomes a song of hope that unites the ages. Remember, emperor and clown, rich and poor, a poor alienated, isolated Ruth, far from home, heard it. He's going to make the same move, but rather than this same sound linking together the ages with a sense of hope, look what it does. Sophocles long ago heard it on the Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. We find also in the sound a thought, hearing it by this distant northern sea. Wow. So now it was heard before, in this case by Sophocles, the guy who wrote Oedipus and Antigone and stuff like that. Pretty much depressing tragedies. Okay, great tragedies, but rather depressing. And yeah, you don't really have a happy tragedy. That would be kind of strange. Comedies, there we go. That's right. Romance. Right. So So now I think here he's on the edge of the English Channel. He imagines him on the edge of the Aegean Sea, which separates Greece from Turkey, on the Aegean Sea. But maybe he heard that same sound. But again, what did that sound bring to Sophocles? Yes, misery. Human misery, okay? There's not much hope. So now, this sound connects the ages, but in terms of that that anxiety, that angst, that despair, that existential despair is linked together by that sound. There doesn't seem to be much hope, right? Sophocles, was living in the golden age of Athens. Who do you sue if I die from, loss of breath from wearing a mask? Is there the university, the mayor, the governor?
I mean, you can go up the chain.
Yeah, that's right. Just keep going on the chain.
Can I do that for my four causes imitation essay?
Oh, that's cool. Oh, that's right.
What are the causes?
Oh, that's kind of cool. I like that. What about poor Dr. Lizzo? Can he handle the mask?
He finally let us go outside and discuss it yesterday so that we could take it.
Oh yeah, because he too. He's got. Yeah, I've got. Oh man, if they pass you though, who knows? You don't want to see it. I don't know. So again, here we are, far isolated, far away from the mystic south, if you will. We're in the far cold north, and then we shift. The sea of faith was once too at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. But now I only hear its melancholy, long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind, down the vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. Now, Arnold wasn't really a believer, and he wasn't raised really as a believer. Sort of nominal Christianity and all that. His father was actually a great, school headmaster, very disciplined and stuff. And he says there was a time when, and imagine the whole island of England, which of course is an island, was like covered and protected by the sea of faith. And what does faith give us? Even if you don't believe in heaven, what does faith give you? Good peace. A sense of peace, wholeness, meaning, purpose. Good. And so I think it's a beautiful image. Like the sea of faith kind of girdled us, kept us safe and held us in and gave us meaning and purpose and light. Oh, the girdle, that is good. I doubt he had this in mind, but yeah, it would be like the girdle of Melian. That's right. And the Silmarillion, it does, and when it falls apart, then all the evil slowly slips in. It's true. Yeah, and I guess you're right. It was pretty quick, but you're right. I would think he is. In some ways, he's using girdle the same way, right? That's being taken. Not girdle. We think of those poor girls like unable to breathe because they're, but girdle as something safe and warm. But all he hears now is with slow withdrawing roar, the sea of faith is gone, and all that came with it. It's just slowly ebbing away. It goes just together with the sound he heard, the sound Sophocles heard maybe. Right? All it goes down, down, far away. It's gone. Our love, let us be true to one another. See, if only she would be true to him, what might he be able to do? If she would be... Yeah, I mean, there might be some hope. Might have some purpose. And I think of the last line we just saw of the bishop, so fair she was. Maybe if she really loved him, there was a real love and a real joy, maybe that could be your new girdle to hold you against the meaningless out there, the existential despair, all of that sort of stuff. It is a lot. That is true.
The next step, I think, in part of our journey is we're at a disconnect with God and humanity.
Right.
Sin. And so I think kind of maybe a first step on the lines of like Dante and human wisdom getting you so far.
Oh, good.
You need like that sort of spiritual grace to carry you through. Like building connections with other people, that's how God works through us. We see God's love through the love of the people around us. So, I mean, yes, ultimately he shouldn't just stop it.
Right.
You love me, therefore you're going to be my savior. But I do think that like by reaching for love with other people, we open ourselves up to be shown God's love.
It's interesting. Yeah, I don't remember who said this, but there's some truth. They were saying that, in this generation now, in some ways, young people are putting too little weight on marriage and too much weight at the same time. And what that means is, not taking seriously the commitment aspect and all that sort of stuff, but at the same time, putting too much pressure, expecting that other person to give you meaning in a meaningless world.
They want
Maybe.
a soulmate, but they don't understand that soulmates are the snap of your finger.
Good.
Hard work put in a lifetime.
It does take a long time.
Your soulmate
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think that was what Tolkien said. He was like,
Oh,
it was
right.
so great. It was in the bulletin once. He was like, yeah, there's somebody out there who'd be a better match for my wife. And
Right.
there's someone who'd be a better match for me.
Right.
But we choose each other.
That's right.
Now we're each other's soulmates because we can grow together.
Because we grow together. That's the point. It is beautiful, you know. You grow and stuff like that, and like I said, you can think this either cynically or beautifully. I remember watching a special about the real Von Trapp family singers. Like it's a real true story. They didn't really climb over the mountains; they got in a train and left. But anyway, I heard Maria Von Trapp, being interviewed, and she talked about it, and she said, "Well, to be honest, when she married the captain, it wasn't really love. She was doing it more for the children. But then afterwards, she learned to truly love him." And like I said, some people would say that's completely anti-romantic, or in a weird way, maybe it's more romantic. Well, that's true. You're right.
He married her to save her.
That's true. Then he became the lover. Yeah.
That's romantic.
Yeah. Well,
But they had a marriage of just like.
yeah, that's true. It took him. You're right. It took him a while to realize he really loved her. Joy. He had married her to allow her to have his. It took cancer, sadly. He married her to extend his citizenship, so she wouldn't have been sent back to America. That's what he meant by saving her. He did that to keep her and her boys there.
That's so interesting. Like, you think Lewis would place a little bit more value on like marriage?
I know.
But on the other hand, I remember one of my favorite parts of the Screwtape letters talking about love is when Screwtape writing and was like talking about a guy who loves a girl.
Oh, right.
To think it's more noble to marry for the
That's right.
storm of emotions than for like some lasting sort of connection.
That's right. You did that.
So stupid, hilarious.
That is very funny. Yeah.
Marriage shouldn't be based on the feeling of love, because that will never last. It should
That-
be
yeah.
based on respect and esteem for the character of your partner, because those will last long.
And that's true. I just said, she just said that. That was like, I'm just talking to Jane Austen. That was really funny. Wow. And that's it. But yeah. But it is true. That's why Lewis didn't consider it a real. When he married her, it was in front of a justice of the peace. It wasn't a church wedding. He was only doing it to extend his citizenship, and he didn't. And they didn't even live together.
But he
Right.
considered it because he respected her and he
Right.
as a friend.
And he was just because he figured I'm not going to marry an old bachelor. But it's really funny. There's a great line in the movie Shadowlands where this is true. They were married, but they were living separately, and he would visit her and stuff like that. And he would visit her every night, and she says to him, "Jack, doesn't it make you laugh that all of our neighbors think that we're unmarried and up to all sorts of wickedness, when in fact we're married and up to nothing?" I imagine Joy saying a line like that. Great line. But anyway, so. Our love, let us be true to one another, but it's not going to hold, right? For the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. And we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. We think we're living in a Claire Jones poem, right? But we're not, right? We think it's beautiful and fairy tale Tolkien stuff, right? But we're living in a place that there's no joy or love or light, no certitude, no certainty, no peace, no pain. Here we are, we're stranded out here on this darkling plain. Did you hear the word darkling used in a different poem? It just means in the dark, but darkling I listen, and at times I have been half in love with easeful death. Called him. Close. No, wait a minute. No, I'm sorry. It is Nightingale. I'm sorry. It is Nightingale. Yeah. Remember that? Yeah. Called him sweet names when he was right. Yeah. So that's that. Certain. Whenever you use the word darkling, you think of that. We're gonna read another poem in a few weeks called "The Darkling Thrush" by Thomas Hardy that also calls back Keats. But here. Again, we're in a world where again, there's no measures. Ignorant armies clash by night. Some critics think that might be a reference to the creation, evolution, people fighting. Whatever it is, it's an image of, again, no peace, no certitude. I'm stranded here on this cold northern strand, and there's nowhere to go, sort of. And the love is not going to redeem either one of them. And so it's a pretty depressing poem. I mean, ultimately, all of Arnold's poems are depressing. Okay, but some of them are depressing in different ways. Okay, so now that's Dover Beats. The one right afterwards, Stanzas from the Grand Chartreuse. We'll start this and we'll finish next class. But this is a much longer poem, and it has a lot of the same themes as Dover Beats, but this one is longer. Now, it's got a very long beginning that we'll just kind of skip into because it's based. again, I think we can pretty much say it's Arnold. He did actually go on a journey where he visited this old Carthusian monastery. And those are the monks that are, I mean, all monks are austere, but these are like the super austere monks that like don't speak at all and live on, a few hours of sleep. And I mean, he's very, very austere. And these are people who particularly appear to be, quote, medieval, okay? Real throwback to severe asceticism. And Arnold goes and visits. Arnold, again, very modern, sophisticated, skeptical sort of person, visits it, looks at all of these people, sees it as, shocked by the things they do. But I wanted to jump to the center of the poem because it really picks up on page 436, and it's line 67, starting with that stanza. We'll move slowly here. Okay. As he stands there, okay, and again stands in the middle of something he really doesn't believe in, right? And it's something that in some ways, he's against all this medievalism. He's supposed to be a Victorian, looking forward, wanting to believe in progress and building new things and all that stuff, moving forth, right? He says, and then he basically asks himself, what am I doing here, right? And then he starts by saying, for rigorous teachers seized my youth and purged its faith and trimmed its fire, showed me the high white star of truth, there bade me gaze and there aspire. Even now their whispers pierce the gloom. What dost thou in this living tomb? He imagines his teachers saying to him, what are you doing in this place? Now, I actually think this is, he doesn't mean it to be, but I think this is highly comical. Because basically what he's saying is almost as if one of you graduated from HBU and you were, I don't know, like in a strip club, and you imagine the voice of Marco saying, what are you doing in this place? Okay? Now this is funny because we're flipping it on its head. His teachers were all, maybe not atheists, but agnostics, skeptics, cynics. What are you doing in this medieval place? I mean, from their point of view, that's almost as bad as it being in the strip club. In other words, you're going to this place that stands for the opposite of everything we've taught you. Matthew. Very good. And when you said that, were you thinking also of hard times? Yeah, good. Good. That's a good point. Think of Gradgrind was horrified when he saw his children go where? In the beginning of the book, remember where did they go? The circus, right? Never wonder. What are you doing? It's terrible. What are you doing in the circus, right? Anyway, it's kind of funny. He was given a very materialistic, in the philosophical sense, all there is matter, very naturalistic, very scientific education to push out all of these old superstitions, right? And you need to understand that the demonization of the Middle Ages, that to a certain extent is still going on. And when I say we, I mean Protestants now. Protestants are partly to blame for this. Because when the Enlightenment people turned against the Middle Ages and what's the word I want, sort of ridiculed it or censored it, or what's the word I want, reviled it, all that sort of stuff, and made us believe it was just completely dark and backwards and ignorant. I was just talking about Dante's universe in the previous class, and what did the Enlightenment people make us believe that all the medieval people thought about the earth? That was flat, okay? Not true at all. And yet, why did they do that? To perpetuate the myth that the Middle Ages, which was Christendom, was absolutely backwards and ignorant and unenlightened, right? They never would have gotten away with that. The secular Enlightenment people never would have gotten away with it if the Protestants weren't happy to join them, because the Protestants didn't like the Middle Ages because it was Catholic, right? Roman Catholic. So again, they allowed themselves to be drawn into that, and that happens, and it very bothers me. Okay, when they do that, even evangelicals jumping on the bandwagon for something that is going to destroy them. Okay, like. Not the phrase Black Lives Matter, but the group Black Lives Matter is a Marxist group that stands against everything that Christianity stands for. If you actually read their thing, it's what's called identity politics. It's nothing, okay? And it's fooling our students. I see some of my own students with the Black Lives Matter. It's like, hey, if you mean you want to treat black people equally, yeah, but don't put that. Those are the people that are against everything you believe.
as just all darkness. But light typically shines brighter in darkness.
That's interesting.
So, like for me, I've always enjoyed like when it's a rainy day or something, and I turn out the lights, or I like close my windows, so I don't have any sort of like weak natural light, and I have like kind of more of a golden sort of glow.
Oh, interesting.
Firelight, I guess. So there can be great beauty in a light in darkness.
Good.
I think. And so, like, just thinking on the Middle Ages, if I think of it, I think of like you have kind of dark, but then sort of a golden glow of like illumination and stuff. And
Beautiful.
that's like, aside from like the cold, hard white light of fact,
Right.
whatever that
Oh,
has,
good.
enlightenment, which is very visual.
That is good. And you know, a lot of medieval art and even Renaissance art was meant to be seen through candlelight. Right? Especially icons are meant to be seen through the flickering light of a candle. And you should see it. It's not as good as it could have been, but Ken Branagh's last movie was called It's All True, and it's about Shakespeare, and he plays Shakespeare. And it's good, but it just gets a little bit too dark. But the whole movie is illuminated by candlelight. That's how he filmed it. This gives it a really neat thing. So it's on, where did I see it? Stars, maybe? Or HBO? It might have been Stars that had it. I think you need that. But of course, by now it might be on Netflix or Amazon. I don't know.
Everything with WRC body, like somebody's just got like maybe it's somebody.
Oh.
Or accounts open, you can just use any.
Oh, that's kind of neat. But look, but like I said, it's not completely successful, but it's pretty good. And his wife is played by Judi Dench. You know, of course, great actress. Anyway, so here he was given a sort of anti-education to beat out of him all these, you know, romantic, mystical ideas. Like for these people, Christianity is okay as long as you remove everything supernatural and all the miracles and only focus on, like, say, the Sermon on the Mount and just teachings, right? That kind of thing. And that's the kind of upbringing he was given. So they like you said, it's just kind of funny. They shocked the Christianity. I mean, that happens sometimes in secular schools. It's kind of scary. So we're gonna enlighten you and open your eyes so you'll be saved from the illusions of your parents or something like that, right? So he was given this simultaneous miracle thing. They told him, and again, the white only look to the truth, by which of course they mean scientific truth, all that. And again, you can imagine, it is a part of a grind education, isn't it? And he imagines hearing them. Okay, what are you doing here? And then he actually feels bad. He actually feels guilty for being in this monastery. It's kind of funny. Right? Forgive me, masters of the mind, at whose behest I long ago so much unlearnt, so much resigned. I come not here to be your foe. I seek these anchorites not in ruth to curse and to deny your truth. Don't worry, I'm not joining the monastery. Okay? Don't worry, I'm not going to become a Catholic. Okay? It'd be bad enough if you became like an actual believing Christian, become a Catholic. It's even worse, right? Don't worry, I'm not doing that. I promise. Okay? Look, my masters of the mind, you already untaught me. You know, a wild idea. A lot of education is an unteaching. And that happens too much in public school and even in colleges now.
Which, if you think of him as like a romantic, admiring Wordsworth,
Right.
is like the what's it called, pre-existence of the soul.
All right.
Where, like you come knowing heaven, and then you're unlearning.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. But here it's more of a almost vicious here.
Religion, so, I mean,
That is interesting. It is more. And again, he was one of the first great critics of Wordsworth too. They're stripping away from him, you know, even his memories maybe of something spiritual or mystic. It's like you're going to behave. You're going to focus only on facts, all that sort of stuff. I mean, it's not quite as bad as the utilitarian education, but still, it is limiting itself only to science and fact and logic and reason and all of those. And of course, reason stripped away.
extreme version.
Yeah. But isn't it's sort of sad? Like he feels like he has to apologize. I'm sorry. What am I doing here? Right? Again, I'm not here as your foe. I'm not here to sympathize with them or to wish they would come back. Well, why am I here then? He explains. Not as their friend or child. So I'm not here as their friend or their disciple. In other words, I'm not here to take their side. I'm also not here to join them. Not as their friend or child I speak, but as on some far northern strand, thinking of his own gods, a Greek in pity and mournful awe might stand before some fallen runic stone. for both were faiths, and both are gone. Okay, imagine an ancient Greek skeptic. Certainly Euripides seems to be very skeptical. Imagine an Athenian, very skeptical of his own religion and own gods, takes a journey up to Scandinavia and sees, what's that? Norse mythology, and sees some kind of temple to Thor or whatever, Balder, whatever like that. I don't know if there were any statues actually to Balder who died. But imagine, and as he stood before that, he might almost be drawn to tears. Why? Do you understand what's going on in his mind?
There's a rawness in Norse mythology specifically, where it's very primally human in a way that facts-based science is not.
Good.
Especially in contrast to like the height of Athenian wisdom, Plato, who's like, yeah, ignore the body, let's go slowly with the soul and reason.
Good. You know what? It just sort of what you just said. You must be thinking of what's her name? The horrible goddess until we have faces. What? Ungit. They didn't want to Ungit. Yeah. Yeah, all that there, right? And he feels. Okay, the Greek that's there doesn't believe in his own gods and doesn't necessarily want to believe in his own gods. But as he stands here before the ruin of a lost faith, he feels the loss of his country's own faith and feels a melancholy. Doesn't mean he wants to join. He's not going to go back and join, worship Athena or something like that. But he feels, just like a lot of modern skeptics in America or Europe, right? Don't believe anything, but they go to one of those beautiful cathedrals in Europe, and how do they feel? Yeah. Just for a brief moment, then they cast it away. But for a second, it's like, yes, there is something beautiful here that's gone. Right? I'm not saying I want to join this church or even join a Protestant church yet, but there's something that's gone. A beauty in the world has been taken away. That's the way he's feeling. It's an aesthetic feeling. Because for both were faiths and both are gone. I mean, you could feel melancholy about anything that's gone, right? Maybe there was a beauty. A Christian can feel a melancholy for the loss of even the pagan faith, right? There's something about their rituals, and stuff like that, and their simple faith, whatever. We can feel a little bit of a loss for that, for those people that were so close to nature, and nature was alive for them, and we don't want to become a pagan, but we almost feel a melancholy sense of that. Where I said you can feel the pagan power? Have any of you been to the water wall over by the Galleria? It's behind the Galleria, the water wall. Right next to the Transco Tower, whatever it's. Have you been there? Oh, he works? Oh, cool. So you see it all the time. If he ever decides to bite the bullet, he needs to propose at the water wall. That's and a lot of people do. It's a very romantic place to do it. But if you go there and just stand, to me, I feel the power of paganism because the water's pouring down. It's sort of magical and all that sort of stuff. What's that? Yeah, the mist, you're right, comes up. It's an experience, and it's particularly beautiful because, here's the water wall coming down, and if you stand back a little bit, they've built this beautiful proscenium arch, like at a Greek theater, and when you look at it through the arch, I'm surprised they haven't ended a sword and sorcery quest movie there, where you find the Holy Grail in the water, because if you just look at it like that, you're suddenly a million miles away from a big city. Go check it out, it's beautiful if you haven't been there. I haven't been there in a while myself. Okay, for both were faiths and both are gone. Now, here's sort of an essence of this. This is the way he feels. Wandering between two worlds, one dead, the other powerless to be born. That's what it feels like to be stranded in an age of transition, not able to go forward or back. So he's wandering, without a home between two. One dead. What's the dead world? That's the old Romanticism, right? And in a sense, I guess you could say the old mystical monastery too, but particularly for him, it's the old Romanticism. And the other is powerless to be born. It's not fully been born yet. The full Victorian faith, the spirit of progress and all that sort of stuff. You feel like you can't be part of it, right? And good.
I was just going to say, this ties in with my hatred of Socrates as a person, which is
Oh,
partially
yeah.
not very good, but
Interesting.
also the fact that I would not want to meet Socrates and talk with him at that time. I mean, it's fine
Yeah.
now, but before then, because what he does is tears down.
Oh, good.
But then he doesn't offer.
That's very good. That's true.
He doesn't offer you Jesus. There's nothing that he builds up that's right.
That's true.
And so you're just stuck, like.
Well, my book that's coming out, Show the Cover From Plato to Christ, I do say that if all we had was Plato's early dialogues, which are very Socratic, I said I wouldn't consider him the greatest philosopher. And the early ones. It's only when you get to the middle dialects that he goes, once he's wiped away the false, starts moving towards the true. But you're right, it is kind of confusing. It's like, come on, Socrates, well, all right, what do you think truth is? I don't know. You can imagine them wanting to smack that guy. Right? He's a...
Down to the elves' relationship, yes and no.
That's right, actually you're right, but he is in a sense like an elf. Don't go for advice.
No,
Oh.
but that's just for advice, not for like, so who do you think made the world?
Ooh,
You're wrong, but.
it can be very frustrating, right? So, again, caught between wandering back and forth, unable to. I don't know. You guys are all the same age, but I'll bet you there are some people that are, say, 30 right now that are like, I just can't be part of these 18-year-olds, because things have changed so fast. You know how they always give us endless things about the difference between a baby boomer and a millennial and a Generation X millennial. But at least it used to be that each generation was like 30 years. Now it's smaller. Pretty soon it's going to be every 5 years they're going to come up with a new name for the next group because it's changing. Are we already there? I mean, it's so rapidly changing, and it's like,
Hating on everybody else too. It's just a way of dividing us. They're trying to polarize not just political parties, but generations.
Oh, I didn't think about that, but yeah, that's true. Man, crazy.
Political parties,
Among other ways.
Wow. Okay, now, wandering between two worlds, one dead, the other powerless to born, with nowhere yet to rest my head. Who says he has no place to rest his head?
Jesus.
Yeah, can you remember the whole quote?
Oh, that is just like an instinctive response.
You got it,
Wait,
okay.
Is it Jesus?
Foxes have holes. Good. So he's making himself into a little bit of a Christ figure, sort of like saying, "I fall upon the thorns of life, I bleed." Okay, he's making himself into a little bit of a martyr. Maybe not so dramatic, but it's with nowhere. I have no place to go. I'm homeless. Like these on earth, I wait forlorn. Their faith, my tears, the world deride. I come to shed them at their side. I mean, okay, here's something. It's becoming less and less true, but it would be more true like 20 years ago, okay, because the Baptists have opened up more, okay, but let's go back 20 years, right? And so many Baptists are, come against fantasy, against any of that sort of imagination stuff, right? But I still want to go to the Renaissance Festival, right? And in the Renaissance Festival, I'm rubbing elbows with people who would disagree with me about family, sexuality, politics, religion, everything, right? And yet for a moment I feel a strange kinship with them because both of us, both me and the hippie, let's make it a hippie, okay? The hippie is rejected by fancy society, but I, as a Christian who wants imagination and beauty, feel a little bit rejected, and so I'm brought together. Politics makes strange bedfellows. So here, he doesn't want to join them, but he feels a kinship with them because both he, in other words, both the romantic Matthew Arnold, the excessively romantic Matthew Arnold, and these Carthusian monks are both rejected by society. Why? For different reasons. What does society reject about the monks? Their faith, right? Because it's old-fashioned, it's mystical, it is anti-progressive. But what do they reject about Arnold?
His mourning.
Good. His mourning, his tears. Come on. Straight up. Okay, remember? Is this a time? What's that?
They don't want emotion.
Good, they don't want emotion. Stop it. Get with the program. Does somebody say this to the mourning Tennyson?
Yes.
Is this a time for private sorrows grief? Good, you got it. Those three people. It's number 21. When the three people, one says, "Let him go." One says, "Stop it! You're going to make all men weak." The cynic. The other one says, "He just does it so people will think he's a nice guy." And the third one, again, is this a time for private sorrows grief when the world is moving on? Right. So he feels stuck. He says. Again, both of us are rejected by the world, and so I'm going to, again, some conservative Christians like old movies, and some crazy hippies like old movies, and we end up together, right? So I'm here for relief. And then we'll end here and come back next time. Oh, hide me in your gloom profound. Take me in. Right now I feel cut off from my world. Ye solemn seats of holy pain, take me cowled forms and fence me round, till I possess my soul again, till free my thoughts before me roll, not chafed by hourly false control. Take me in for a moment. And you do know that, not as much, but maybe like 15, 20 years ago, a lot of these like big Wall Street executives were leaving for a vacation and spending a week in a monastery. And these were not believers at all. Why were they doing? They wanted to find, there was sanctuary, a little bit of peace in the midst of madness, right? They don't want to join. They're not even Christian, a lot of them. But they just feel a need to get away. Let me get my soul back, and then I'll come back. And the only people that understand me right now are these people that I don't agree with, but at least they understand my melancholy and my tears, and they understand what it means to be rejected and an outcast, right? It's really cool. Really cool. Okay, so we will pick up right there next class on Tuesday. We'll do that, and then we'll move on to Thomas Hardy. So keep reading, and good stuff. Good stuff. We made it. Yay!